evening includes 3 parts. The first one, our honored guest, David Neuman, will explore the Swedish eye on the Sweden contemporary art, focusing on Magasin 3 Museum. The second part is going to be a Q&A between Suzanne Landau and David. And as I said, the third part is going to be the question from the audience, which it's about 10 minutes. So enjoy the evening, and Suzanne Landau, the floor is yours.
Erev tov lekulam. Good evening.
I don't know what.
Fascinating phenomenon in the art world are no doubt private museums. And tonight we will focus first on a leading private museum in Sweden, followed by discussion about different aspects of private museum and their relationship to the public institutions. I'm pleased to welcome our distinguished guest tonight, David Neuman.
Hello, everyone. And initially, I want to thank Dafna for putting this all together, and of course Suzanne to reaching out to me here in Stockholm in the archipelago. I'm currently outside the city, and I thought I would start by making a somewhat brief presentation that spans over 30 years. So many times when I hear presentations, I'm kind of curious where it's all started. What is the dialectic towards a person and in its relationship to the arts? And Suzanne and I, we have had in the past lovely conversations about crucial times in our lives when the interest and the passion has kind of led us forward within the arts. So I thought to make an impossible task even more impossible, which means to try to condense 30 years of exhibition programming. I'm not a director anymore. I'm very much involved in the arts, but I used to lead this institution, Magasin 3, for close to 30 years. And my interest started at the age of 11. And as you can see, this is in 1966. I'm not in this photo, but there is a photo of me in archives. I'm going there with my mother, and it's at the Moderna Museet in Stockholm, which one has to put into context. In 1966, it was founded in 1956 or 58, so it's a very, very new institution. And together with the Stedelijk, which is in Amsterdam, it was one of the few places in the world where museums, contemporary museums or art museums or modern museums were actually interested in what was going on right now. So this is a collaboration, and collaborations is a key word during the practice that I have had the opportunity to lead for so many years. That's the collaboration between ideas, people coming from different angles. So this is 3 very distinguished artists. 2 of them became world artists, Niki de Saint-Phalle and Shonting Lee. And you can imagine I'm 11 years old. I'm walking into this giant woman between her legs, holding my mother's hand, the one that gave birth to me, and I'm walking inside. For me, this was a crucial moment in my upbringing, when I realized that the ideas and the thoughts were limitless. In this museum, which has a wonderful collection, and Dafna, this is going to be I'm going to jump over images in the end, but in this museum there is a wonderful collection of modern art. So these are images which I'm at 11 or 12 years old, and I used to curate my own exhibitions around my bed based on postcards. And this painting by Salvador Dali, and I want you to focus on the size of this painting, because most of the important Dali paintings are, when you see them for the very first time, you're always amazed and shocked that they are kind of smallish. And this is a gigantic painting, and I have had the opportunity to kind of embrace at least 2 projects in my life where the size of the expression of the artwork is enormous. And of course, being a young boy, this whole thing, the dream world, to see images like this was just kind of mind-boggling. Then I jump, and my first time in New York was in 1973, and I was there for a number of months. And I remember I visited the Guggenheim Museum and saw a wonderful retrospective with Jean Dubuffet, where you could see the Cuckoo Bazaar, which is where, again, the performative aspect of art was something that was kind of amazing. At the same time, of course, a building where the architecture has such a significance. 1979, I had the opportunity to move to the United States, where I almost spent close to 20 years. So to the left, a lot of hair. I still have a lot of hair, but it's more on the grayish side now. I'm in the Garden of the MoMA, Museum of Modern Art, another iconic institution, in front of a Jacques Lipchitz sculpture, which stands there, and I think it's never been removed. Then I do a super jump in time, and it's 2017, and it's Venice, and it's hot. And I like this image because it's a metaphor that you can't do things by yourself. And I'm leaning on one of my oldest and dearest friends, Robert Weil, that has been, it's not in words I can express the support of Magazine 3, of all the different ideas and ventures that I have initiated together with an extraordinary team of co-workers during all this time. And this is something that I think Suzanne and I will come back to when we discuss the balance between public and private. Magazine 3, and I know we will see wonderful images of private institutions. I'm not sure if I wish this would be the whole building. It's not the whole building. This is like a small part of this building on the first floor and on the ground floor and so on. But it's located in the old harbor area of Stockholm, which was the Freeport. And outside here, you can also see a wonderful sculpture by Truls Melin. And it plays also, it embraces the industrial quality of exhibition spaces, which later came to be very prevalent. And I'm in particular thinking about Tate and Tate Modern, and a lot of other institutions around the world that has kind of embraced the industrial. So I'm in New York. I'm hanging out with Tordis Müller and Heiner Friedrich and all these people around the DIA Arts Foundation. It was called that at the time. And as a kind of an aesthetics, I'm fascinated by the minimalism. Coming from Sweden, I was kind of exposed to the more expressionistic quality of painting. So I'm just running through, and this is a very small selection of different exhibitions that we have done over the years. And I think if there's one quality that we have managed over the years, and that my co-workers and the current director and everyone has to do with our close relationship with the artists. And that started very, very early on. Here is a two-person show with Alfredo Jar and Ronald Jones. And Alfredo has become one of the leading artists that has also embraced a lot of political subject matters. And unfortunately, my dear friend Ronald Jones passed away last year. But this is about, to the left in the image, you can see a wonderful work which is called the Vietnam Tables, and it talks about the struggles with trying to negotiate how the form of the table should look in Paris when the North and the South Vietnam and the Viet Cong and the Americans were negotiating. That took 2 years to come up with that. Here again, a flashback to a project which has its initial dimension in the current presentation in Magasin Jaffa, and this is by a Swedish painter called Leonard Forslund, and this is a 30-meter painting, and I'm actually delighted to have, with the help of Hedvig Furuhagen at Magasin 3, to be able to put together all these images, because it has also had the opportunity for me to kind of reflect on certain decisions that I've done in the past, and consciously or subconsciously they had showed up again. This painting had to do very much with our waste of energy, and this is in 1990, and how world population and so on, and it's a 30-meter long painting. As I said before, a lot of these exhibitions and a lot of these meetings had to do with also forming wonderful friendships and relationships. And this is with one of the great minimalist artists, Fred Sandback, unfortunately also passed away a number of years ago. And currently there is a work at the Israel Museum. Is it up still, Suzanne? I think so, and it's at the Israel Museum, and it's a work that Suzanne acquired many years ago, and it's installed in a small room, which is magnificent. Felix Gonzalez Torres is an artist that I got to know in New York, and we did a big exhibition in Stockholm. I won't go into the details of it, but this is quite early in his career. At the same time, it is again he passed away in AIDS, and a lot of his artistry at the time had to do with the issue of the gay society, and also the questions regarding another virus which hit the world. Angus Martin, again, someone that I met in New York, and when I look at these images, I kind of choke up a little bit, because she worked on these paintings for us, and it was 8 paintings that we installed in 94. As I've stated before, we have just selected, Hedvig and I, a choice of all the presentations. Terrell, which is also work that is at the Israel Museum in the Billy Rose Sculpture Garden, and this is a permanent piece, which is called Dawning, and it's still available to view at the Magasin 3. And here is Jim at the time we were working in Stockholm. I kind of moved back to Sweden in the mid-90s. So a lot of these other exhibitions were kind of a lot traveling back and forth, and changed the kind of temperament by also including a lot of key European artists. Among them was a meeting between a Swedish artist that they died in 1911 and the iconic German painter Baselitz. And here Baselitz and I are kind of strolling around on an island outside Stockholm in the archipelago, where I'm currently just sitting. So I took him out here. And also I wish to add that 95% of all the works that you see in this presentation is part of our collection. So and this was the meeting between this wonderful artist Carl Fredrik Hill and Baselitz. And Baselitz had followed this artist since the early 60s, when he was kind of managed to get out of East Germany. Another installation that we did with Anthony Gormley and all his small clay figures. This is a work by an American artist, Polly Apfelbaum. And I see now that somehow, and one can analyze that later, somehow there is a kind of a weight towards the US or the American artists. It's not really that. In the beginning, of course it was, because I was living in the States, but later on it changed. But this is by Polly Apfelbaum, and Polly is going to show with us at Magasin 3 in Jaffa. It would have been scheduled to do this year, but we had, of course, to postpone it. And this is a work which will actually be taken to Jaffa to be seen together with some magnificent new works. Here is an exhibition in 96-97, and to the left you see Nahum Tevet. He was part of this exhibition, and on the right side is a work by Jessica Stockholder. Also a dear friend again that passed away, Chris Burden. And here is Chris in Stockholm showing the strength of a little bridge, which is called the Curator Bridge. And this was a wonderful project that we initiated from Stockholm. And it includes also more earlier works, which is in our collection. Among them is the bee car. Sadly to say, Chris also passed away 2 years ago. I guess this is what happens when one has been around for a while. Another group show in year 2000 with the Brazilian artist, and you can see a work which is in the collection, of course, by Ernesto Neto. A Swedish artist, a dear friend of mine, he's also a board member at Magasin 3, Lars Nilsson, and this is works that he has exhibited at our place and also at Palais de Tokyo. For a 5-year period, we had a satellite space way before Magasin 3 in Jaffa, and it was on the Royal Grounds in Stockholm, and we did these wonderful exhibitions in the summers that embraced both architecture, design, and art. And this is by a performance by the Tony Ausler. And here I just want to see also for you to see, this is a Turkish artist, Ayşe Erkman, and this is also where you could see the scale of some of the projects, exhibitions that we've done, where it also here it's clearly is dealing with an intervention in the physical space. And as you could see, we have very distinguished pillars. They have 8, they are octagons, and Ayşe inverted these by creating the same kind of pillar upside down in steel. Also with I don't know how many kilometers of fabric, which was from car, what you manufacture safety belts with in cars. So in case you ever need any extra car belts, I think we have a couple of kilometers left. Janine Antoni, born in Freeport, Bahamas, a work which you will see a little bit later in my presentation, where this work, as you see, it's a work in progress, which means that every time it's exhibited, it's added to this rope, and the rope is made in an old kind of rope technique. And some of these works, or some of the practices with the artists also led to other works. And here again, I love the connection between the physicality of a work and an artist's practice. So by making these ropes, Janine made a work which is called Touch, and hopefully it works. And she is walking, of course, on the horizon and on a rope that she made herself. So the extension of her practice was also to learn how to walk on a tightrope. Again, a wonderful painter, Katharina Grosse, and as you could see, a painting, a technique, a practice that leaves the canvas and moves into the space. Mona Khatoum, again, an artist that I met very, very early on in her career, and that we followed, and we have a fair amount of works in our collection. And this is a show where we produced together with her, and at that time our technicians and staff to create these wonderful works. One of our key exhibitions, which was curated by Richard Julin, and I will come back to him later, is by Pippi Lotte-Rist. And this is a work, again, of course, in the collection, and it's called Gravity Be My Friend. And I want to just emphasize the fact that you could see Pippi Lotte and one of her co-workers basically they didn't live in our space, but they were there for close to a month and created the work in our space. A close relationship with the Israeli art scene, primarily through a wonderful friend and a curator, Sarit Shapira, that sadly also passed away last year. And this is two works, and one by Gil Marco Shani, that had a great installation at the Israel Museum about a year and a half ago, and Jan Tichy. And Sarit was an associate curator at Magasin 3 for a number of years, together with three other key curators. And in that show was also Raida Sadeh and Jumana Emil Aboud. We were also the first people that did Christian Boltanski, and Christian has made a lot of collaborations and works in Israel, but he created something called the Heart Archive, and we were the first station for the Heart Archive, and that is available in a very, very special place in Japan, where you can go and listen to, I think it's 30 or 40,000 heart sound. Smadar Dreyfus, an Israeli-born artist living in London, did again a wonderful show, and this is a work which is called 360 Degrees, and why I picked that has to do with that the camera kind of goes, of course, 360 degrees, but a lot of it is about the shoreline, just outside Jaffa, and you can really see Jaffa in this film, and I think it kind of initiated together with Robert Weil these ideas of Jaffa, which Suzanne and I hopefully we will have some minutes to talk about. Tal Air, an exhibition, and it's 10 years before the current presentation that we have in Jaffa. Again, Tom Friedman, it's about 800 or 900 works, and it's called Up in the Air, and it was commissioned for us, and then it was moved under Suzanne's hardcore conviction to the Tel Aviv Museum. And honestly, when I see it in the Lightfall, it's about the best. I don't understand why it's not permanent there, but I think if you have installed it once, that's it. You'll never do it again. But it was a wonderful project, and in the image to the left, you can see Ruti director and Tom Friedman with a handful of technicians. Andrea Sittel, living in the United States, is again an issue of the environment, and it's a big exhibition we did. And as you could see, she has these kind of cells, these kind of environmental places where you can live, and you can live overnight. And we built some of them, and actually, for those that look carefully, we even put our logo on one of these huts in the desert. In 2011, I think, Tessa Brown, which is our current and our acting director of Magazine 3, we were in China. Suzanne, I think you were there too. And it was part of a big conference, and we had the opportunity to meet Ai Weiwei. And less than a year later, we had this wonderful exhibition with him. Unfortunately, this was the time when he was incarcerated, and for 81 days, I think no one knew where he was in the world, and people were afraid that one would never see him. And a couple of years later, he managed to get to Stockholm to see images and to talk with us. And Tessa Brown has a legendary kind of Skype conference with him at the time of the opening, when he didn't dare to leave China. Here, Mika Rothenberg, another photo with a social photo of Suzanne and Mika in a cool restaurant outside on Coney Island. We have a huge collection of works on paper. I find that has always been my entryway, the drawings, more than the paintings. And in this image, you can see in the background, you can see works by Alexandra Zuckerman and Jakob Nordström and Amy Simon, which happens to be my wife, on the red wall. Here I'm with a wonderful actress that made a pod or a presentation together with me, and we are again looking at the larger works are by Tal Air, and the smaller ones by a deceased Swedish artist that lived in the 19th century. Christine Ödlund, one of the exhibitions that we did not that many years ago, she has also, I think, showed in Tel Aviv with the help of Sandra Weil, and very much about the ecology of nature and man. Chapman, an exhibition that Tessa did, where again we managed to get to entice the artist to do work in the exhibition space, which is wonderful. So here is Jake Chapman asking us to buy more and more of taxidermy animals and so on, and working. Gunnel Wåhlstrand was the last exhibition we did before we made this temporary closing in Stockholm. And she's a Swedish artist that we followed from the very early of her career. And this also kind of shows how many exhibitions and projects we have done in collaboration or association with other institutions. And this was with the Boymans in Rotterdam. And here is Gunnel, and this is an extraordinary work. It's almost 2 meters long on the left side of her mother. And a jump to Magazine 3 Jaffa. I think it could be fun to have a view, because I'm not sure if everyone that is taking part of this talk this afternoon or evening, early evening. So in 2018 we opened with a presentation or exhibition with Chaim Steinbach, and Chaim left Israel in 1957 at the age of 13. And I think this is one of the only, might be somewhere else, one person kind of presentation of him. And he was of course mesmerized by being in Israel. And here is Chaim with me, and then is Chaim in New York with Sheila Hicks having lunch. And Sheila Hicks was the second exhibition that we organized in Jaffa. And here is Sheila with Karmit. We are resting here, and also an image of Sheila wonderfully talking with people. And Sandra, which is a part of our expanded family, of course, the daughter of Robert Weil and an independent curator. She is very much involved in equality and social issues in Tel Aviv, in Israel. So here she has brought a group of primarily refugees to us at Magazine 3. And this is a third exhibition in Jaffa. It's wonderful because I can kind of present them all. And this is by the German artist Cosima von Bonin. And these are all works which are in our collection. Some were added for this specific exhibition. And here is Karmit showing us I don't know what. And we are fast leading up to the current presentation, which will be only for a little while longer. And then we are hoping to move it to Stockholm, and hopefully to a continuation of a tour around Europe. And this is the title of the show, and the painting is called The Night. And again, this is kind of a dream, and to make an exhibition again with Tal in this way. And here is Tal on the right side in his studio, and here you can actually also see the kind of change in terms of the temperature of the paintings and so on. And to add something, which is an institution which is birthed out of a co-founding of the curatorial program, which I did in 2003 in Stockholm. Last year in 2019, in September 6, the accelerator opened, and this is something which has been very much supported by Magazine 3 and Robert's Weil's Family Foundation. And this is the director, and Richard Julin was the deputy director at Magazine 3 for many years. And again, we have created this wonderful collaboration between a private institution, Magazine 3, and a federal university, a large scale, a university that has about 65,000-70,000 students, 5,000 employees. And on this campus, we have provided part funding and also part access to our collection. And again, here you could see, prior to opening the accelerator, we lent them Janine Antoni's rope, which is now, people at Magazine knows it, but it's maybe 130, 140 meters. So in terms of finding ways how we will work together in the future, this is a very, very exciting aspect. And one of the exhibitions which we did again many years ago at Magazine 3, it was with the artist Tino Segal, and that was the opening exhibition at the accelerator. And I'm amazed, because in those days no one was allowed to photograph Tino, and now it seems at least that he can allow himself for promotional photos. For you that follow, you can see there is a certain parallel between the architecture proportions or aesthetic of the accelerator in relationship to Magazine 3. Again, an industrial building. The accelerator is an old lab, and it would take me way too much time to explain the parameters. And this is the current exhibition, which is now viewed digitally. The university is closed, and so they have developed a wonderful way of touring the work digitally together with a guide, so to say. And now we are kind of back to Magazine 3, and we are back to the leadership of Tessa Brown, and it was meant that we would open for audience in May, and we all know that didn't happen, so we are opening after the summer. But in the meantime, we are doing, as many other places around the world, very kind of wonderful project with Felix Gonzalez Torres, and it's called the Fortune Cookie Corner. And so this is how it looks. We are, Tessa is kind of rebuilding and tearing out a lot of things, and in the meantime, we have some art. And I think this little fortune cookie where it says "Live your life to the fullest each day" is a nice way of ending this presentation, with the addition of this work, which is a model, and this is for Magazine 3 Jaffa's exhibition, which will open also after the summer, with the wonderful artist Maya Atun, and under the curatorship of Karmit Galili. I think that's it.
David, thank you. 30 years of art history, 30 amazing years. And I have to say that there are many artists, and you know that we both like. And so I would like to ask you just briefly to tell what is the difference between Magazine 3 for the 30 years, and what will be the Magazine 3 now when it will reopen in September, October?
Yeah, I mean, the right person, of course, to answer this would be Tessa Brown. But of course, the change has been developed through intense discussions, and I think one of the elements has to do with creating a platform or a format where we are primarily focusing on the visitor, to create an experience that should be even better than it's been in the past. And by doing so, we want to, and it sounds almost like, how should I say, it's almost like Corona pandemic adjusted parameters, but it has to do with applying the intellectual dimension in a much clearer way, by asking people to decide when they should come, to take people around in groups, to realize that there are a wonderful amount of museums in Stockholm that operate in a more traditional and classical way, and us wanting to focus on the content in another way, and also understanding our limits in terms of accessibility. And there are institutions, as you know, Suzanne, around the world, like Schaulager and other places, where there is a certain differentiation between a professional group of people or interest and a general public.
Absolutely.
And to combine that with the programming that has the kind of, hopefully the highest quality. And by doing that, and at the same time engaging heavily both the institution, Magasin 3, but also the staff and everyone else in the opening in Jaffa, and also opening of the accelerator.
I know.
We just felt that we needed the time and to kind of do it right.
So let's talk about the status of private museums vis-a-vis institutions. We want to understand what is the basic difference between the private and the public institution. Amazingly, there are more than 300 private museums of contemporary art. I'm not talking about other museums, contemporary art in the world. 70% founded after 2000, and 12 between 1970 to 1990, like the museum you co-founded in 1987. Privately supported, their collections reflect the personal taste. Their premises are situated in unique buildings designed by leading architects. Their financial power enables them to display artworks of high quality and to organize shows that rival or even surpass institutional exhibitions. They don't need public support and organize 1 to 3 exhibitions yearly. Since they are relatively small, they are also flexible and can even act impromptu. When you initiated Magasin 3, there was a different climate. And what happened, especially after 2000, that caused such an overwhelming downpour, I would say, of private museums around the globe? How the art scene changed since?
Well, I think your analysis is extremely valid. You have a lot of images of really substantial private museums, which you would.
We will see it in a minute. Yes.
Yeah, and I think there are different levels. If I talk about Magasin 3. My and Robert's idea was to create a small alternative toward a society where we were birthed into understand that medical care, schooling, and culture are provided by the state. And as you can see, we were never focused on creating the signature building with the signature architecture. Right. Because with that, you are getting very, very, very close to parameters which are more like the public funded institutions. And when the images are coming here by Eli Broad in Los Angeles or Louis Vuitton and so on, I think these institutions are of course initiated by super wealthy foundations or people, and I think the primary motive is to I'm not certain what that is, but they are rapidly, of course, getting into the complexity of running an institution, whether it is the Israel Museum or the Tel Aviv Museum.
Yeah.
I think what is interesting with these kind of initiative is the fact that that the public institutions realized very early on that you can create wonderful partnerships. We did an organization together with a handful of private institutions in Europe, among them Sandretto in Torino, and on our first event was Nick Serota, understanding clearly that this is a very, very important part of it. Of course, there are very, I would say, basic elements also to some of these institutions, which has to do with the collecting aspect,
Exactly.
the growth of wealth, tax reasons, all of those. And then there are a handful of them that are birthed out of other criterias, which has more to do, I think, with the dialectic between the art and the artists. But that they are here to stay, I think so. Of course, it will be very, very interesting to make an analysis after, when we have reached the aftermath of what we are currently living in around the globe with this current pandemic, and how some of these institutions will manage. I think they are in for huge challenges, of course, the same way the public institutions are.
What is interesting, that actually most of the private museums are located, first of all, now in China, South Korea, United States, Germany, and Italy. And why do you think, here we can see on the map, the concentration of the museum. Why do you think there are no private museum of contemporary art in Israel? But before you answer, I would really go through quickly the images we have, as what you mentioned, Vuitton and so people can see again. I'm sure most of them, they visited all of them, but here they are. As you mentioned, the Broad Museum in LA, and Fondazione Prada in Milan, in Hotel Museum. David, remember when we visited in Hotel Museum? And Zeitz Mocha, Cape Town, South Africa. There are so many, but just Glenstone Museum in Maryland, United States. And of course, Vuitton in Paris, Garage in Moscow, Teshima, where is also the piece of Boltanski, the heart beating. Schaulager, you mentioned Schaulager, Basel, Tasmania, this crazy museum of old and new, Mona. Bayer, of course. Youth, Shanghai, and Seoul, South Korea. We were there at the opening of Leum. So, David, what do you think? Why we don't have a private museum in Israel, private museum of the contemporary?
Well, I think it's, and I have to keep my tongue correct now, but I think it's like this. Israel is a very old country, but a very young nation.
Right.
And certain elements needs to be internalized. It cannot just be, you can't just adapt it. But I do think that there is, of course, a handful of people or foundations in Israel that could do it. And I think it will happen. It just needs sometimes. I think the grandiosity of some of the ideas is unnecessary, And I want to stress that when it comes to Magasin 3 over these years, there is nothing grandiose about our places, but there is a level of quality. And Israel being an old country with areas which could be massively interesting, if they can create a dia beacon outside New York, which is like an hour and a half, 2 hours with train, in an old printing factory, they could surely create a place to visit as a museum setting somewhere in Israel. And it doesn't necessarily need to be in Tel Aviv. It could be where you combine it. I think it will happen. I've met people in Israel that are talking about it, but it cannot. You can't open it in a finished form, and I think that's one of the challenges. It has to be on an organic work, and then I think it will happen.
You know, one thing is lacking in Israel, and this is philanthropy. And philanthropy is part of it. So we have to wait until one day the philanthropy will be part of our cultural life. Anyway, but in this context, I would like to go back to Jaffa and to your space there and to ask you what were the challenges until you were able to realize it, and also what do you expect to achieve with this?
Well, I think this is again a very valid question. Of course, there is a built-in statement, I think, by being in Jaffa rather than on Rothschild Boulevard, and I'm taking that as a metaphor. And I think Tel Aviv as a city. And we are involved in a lot of different projects in the city, which will be too complicated and time-consuming to discuss now. Yeah, but the whole aspect of Jaffa being a part of Tel Aviv, I thought was interesting, and I couldn't really see any expression of cultural addition in Jaffa the way we are trying to do, and with Karmit and her team, we are reaching out and we are trying to make the threshold as low as possible, and so low that you can actually visit us any time of the day, and if you feel hesitant or uncomfortable of walking into a space like this, you think it's too pretentious or too fancy or whatever, you can come 2 o'clock in the morning, and you can press your nose and your face and you can view it. And with these codes, you can also take part of the information. So it is a space which and I think a little bit of that dimension also has to do with how certain areas in other cities, whether it is in New York or Berlin or in London or in Stockholm, is that you are curious about these areas where people will say, why in Jaffa? And that's one of the reasons why we are there. Also, of course, the multicultural aspect. It is an area of Tel Aviv which is not as homogeneous as others.
Actually, the fact that you can see it any time in the day or in the night, it's really beautiful. And I think it really works very well. My other question is about, one of the most important aspects, and precious aspect of the private museum is the way how can one experience art. And it was your goal to create the most optimal conditions for a personal and intimate viewing of an artwork, something which we lost for a long, long time in the public institutions. And so, for instance, when you had the exhibition of Ai Weiwei in 2012, and the exhibition brought to Magasin 3, how many? 40,000 visitors?
Yeah, roughly, yeah.
You are losing what you were trying to do and create. You are not doing any effort to increase, right, the number of the visitors. But the public museums, on the contrary, they are all the time under pressure to increase the number of the visitors. From one side, because they need the entrance fee for their budget, and also because the parameter of the success of the museum. So it was like, how many visitors you had, this was how you were, as much you were successful, right? And I think that still experiencing the art actually is the essence of visiting the museum. And I wanted to ask you, what you think museums are doing nowadays in this matter? I mean, in this respect.
Well, I
Help
think
us to experience really properly artwork, as you are doing and as you are trying to really, your effort.
I think, I mean, the question is massively complex, but as you know,
It is.
some of the aspects of the mega museums, like the Tate or like the MoMA and so on, they are of course located and placed in metropole cities where real estate, where all these are just staggering. And the MoMA's expansion now, for example, I think we haven't seen what this current change in the world will mean for these institutions. They are so based on tourists. They are so based on the huge numbers, and a real estate structure that is crazy. And and many of these institutions are now open 7 days a week. There's no Shabbat, so they because, and it's not primarily because they don't want to have a day of rest. It's primarily because they need to constantly add the people. And of course it is in a contrast to the experience of seeing something in a smaller group. And I used to polarize it a little bit by saying, if I go to a rock concert, I love to sit among 30, 40, 50,000 people. It gives energy. But if I stand in front of a Mark Rothko painting, I love to be maybe by myself or maybe one or two other people. And I think maybe one can read it a little bit from the beginning of my presentation, that I think that very small meetings in time that you have as an individual can have a huge impact on you and on others. And that is not a matter of numbers. And if you talk about, the Dada movement in Zurich in the late 19-teens, those kind of events at these restaurants or these performances, they were met by 30, 40, 50 people, and nevertheless are part of our history. And this has kind of built into something. Something has gone wrong where you measure the success of the number of people. But what I think is even more challenging is you measure the importance in the amount of people, and that is totally wrong.
I agree.
Yeah, very small events. I think Samuel Beckett's, some of his first plays were viewed by 20, 30 people.
Yeah. Let's move to the other question.
Sure.
And we are talking about, like, we can see that costs grow to tackle pandemic crisis simultaneously with the crisis, with the climate emergency. There is a group of galleries forming in these days, the Gallery Climate Coalition. Did you hear about this?
No.
Concern about the most urgent issues. And I think we talked about it at Biennale, of travel and transport to art fairs, biennales, and blockbuster shows. What do you think will happen in the post-corona era? Will the museums and private institutions as well care more seriously about the carbon footprint? Because
Well,
part of it.
I haven't thought about it, and you sent me this question before, and I'm certain there are people listening to this conversation right now that is more knowledgeable about this. But of course there is a when it comes to the exhibitions, they are usually so institutional exhibitions. They are usually so carefully orchestrated and so on. So I think that would be a very sad aspect if you can't share because you don't want to fly a painting across the world. But of course, when it comes to biennales and certain other aspects, one can wonder what is the reality of schlepping a work from one fair to another that you can't sell. And of course there will be something like that. I think both cost, but probably also the carbon footprint will play a role. And before this pandemic, there was a little kind of almost humorous articles about one of the super curator, Hans Ulrich Obrist, that had, I don't know how many, 2,000 flights within the last
yes.
And they went after him because of course that's the curatorial aspect of it, but surely the digital and taking part of things can make a huge difference. I'm not sure where it will end up. I think it would be sad to prevent people from creating great exhibitions just because they don't want to fly some paintings.
But at least I hope that, you know, the number of biennales and art fairs will be reduced.
Very likely, very likely.
This is crucial. This is very important. And now my last question is, you know, for decades, cultural institutions have generally opted out of politically heated debates, positioning themselves as neutral territory, but not anymore. How do you see the current solidarity of the museums, galleries, and art professionals with the Black Lives Matter protests?
I mean, that is an interesting question. You know, and I know, and a lot of the people that are listening know that within the last 5 to 10 years, there has been a major shift in what we used to embrace when it came to biennales and exhibitions and so on, and it has changed. The interest in non-Western art has increased tremendously, and Black Lives Matter is of course a movement that is birthed from United States. That's where it comes from, and it comes from African American population, which we don't need to go into the history, but of course came to this country, this nation, under extraordinary specific circumstances. And so I think parallel to the obvious criteria of equality, I do think, and we are already seeing it, that there is a massive adjustment to correct some of the aspects of this. The same way gender was a very strong, and it's still far from fulfilled, but it was a very strong topic, maybe even longer back in time. Is it important? Absolutely. And I think, again, I think the arts is one of the places where you will see it ahead of a lot of other fields. And we have already seen it in collection presentations. One is trying to look at it from another point of view. We are seeing it in curators having a specific field of expertise and so on. But as of now, it's of course very infected and very, very volatile. And it will level off, which is good, because then the intellectual dialogue will be more clear, and it's here to stay. And I basically only see positive aspects of it, because it has to do with a certain level of privilege that we has taken for granted, and we shouldn't.
Absolutely, absolutely. David, we have to have some, we left some time for questions from the audience.
Sure.
I would like to ask Sahar, who is in charge of this question, he will take the floor. Sahar?
Thank you, Suzanne. Can you hear me?
Sure.
Hi, David. Thank you. So I was asking if I was asking the audience if anyone has any questions for you, but nobody answered yet. So I will ask in behalf of our team. We want to know about the value of collaborations and partnership is rooted in the Swedish culture. Is it urgent now, like in the post-COVID pandemic crisis, more than ever? How do Swedish cultural institutions facing that crisis challenge? We are very curious.
Yeah, well, I first need to object to the post-COVID label, because I think it's our limitations as human beings that we want it to be post, but of course Sweden, about the same population as Israel, has taken a path which I think has been a gamble, and I'm not sure if it will be a successful gamble in terms of regulating what you are allowed to or not. But will it have a massive impact on all culture? For sure. Will it have a massive negative impact? Absolutely. And the money in the system, which has been kind of promised and discussed, will not happen. It's fictitious, and so therefore I think that for a private institution like Magasin 3, it's again even more important to be very clear of what you think you can achieve and what kind of collaborations you can create. And I think with Sweden, certain value, historical value ground that is also in Israel, a certain social democratic build-up from the 40s and 50s and 60s and so on. I think it will be a real challenge what is coming.
Okay, and I was just curious about the accelerator that you collaborate with or actually found. Can you tell us a little bit more about it?
Well, it is something that came out of an academic program, a master program at the university. And, like the Tel Aviv University has a little exhibition or museum area and so on. Stockholm had nothing of that. And we were interested in creating a place. But we realized it had to be already an existing place, so which I didn't mention, but the accelerator is actually 2 floors below ground, so it's an old laboratory, and the board and the rector of the university all realized that it's very important to create a place where the visual arts programming and dialogue can happen, and then with a wonderful team of people, we are searching, and we are learning how to maneuver an institution this way, which is hugely challenging because of a federal structure. But a lot of programming, a lot of interaction with the different faculties, a lot of interaction with research at the university. I mean, it's a seriously good university with tremendous resources. So not for the accelerator, but for other things. So
well, I'm happy to know that Israel or Tel Aviv has something that Sweden is learning from. So that was nice to hear. We have another we have time just for one last question. I'm going to ask a question on behalf of Rotem. She's an artist. She's saying, I'm still puzzled about the advantage and disadvantage of the private museum versus the public ones. Do you feel that managing a private institution give you an advantage with projects and exhibitions?
Yes, I do, and I think metaphorically, maybe I will use the small exhibition presentation with Chaim Steinbach. I'm not sure if that would be an exhibition that one would create in a public institution, both in terms, and I'm stretching it now, I'm polarizing it, but both in terms of kind of public appeal, of complexity, and of kind of yeah. I mean, I think that as a private institution, the same way Suzanne said, possibly if you operate in a good way, you have a little more freedom, and you can take certain risks which you might not be able to do with the same frequency. You can surely do it, because I'm thinking about Gil Marco Shani's presentation at the Israel Museum with the 2 buses. That is a hardcore, magnificent work of art. But I think those are quite rare. And if Gil was here, he would say he had to fight, really, really fight. And therefore, I see the advantage. At the same time, there is no private institutions that can function well without the relationship with the public square, and that's for sure. So don't think that we can provide all the benefits and everything that is needed the same way a public institution. That's nonsense. A public institution, like in Israel, has so many bylaws, and they need to provide collecting, exhibition for a range of things. So we are just, as a private institution, we are top picking, but because we are doing that, we can also sometimes be a little more radical, and maybe sometimes even a little bit more avant-garde.
Thank you, David. Thank you so much. Thank you, Suzanne. Dafna?
1 second, please.
Sure, sorry.
I want to thank David. David, are you still with us?
Yes, yes.
Oh, David, thank you so much. As always, it's a great pleasure to talk to you. And I think that your presentation and
what you have achieved and what you have done is really inspiring and uplifting, and really chapeau. It's a great place, Magasin 3, and I'm looking forward when it will reopen to see the new activities. And thank you very much.
Thank you.
And I think that Dafna would like to she would like to say a few words.
So first of all, I would like to thank David Neuman and the Swedish team, Hedvig, and everybody who was here on board. Really, we appreciate it a lot. And I would like also to thank Sandra Weil, my friend. This relationship with the Swedish scene is already since 2017. So it's a collaboration that started, and we mix it. And I would like to thank our Israeli team of Suzanne, Sahar, Aviv, Sigal. It's a project. It's a huge project. So thank you all. And I just want to say and thank you all participants that you are with us. And I just want to end this meeting and tell you about the 3 upcoming events that we are going to have. On June 15, it's going to be in Hebrew. We are going to host Ido Bruno, the director of Israel Museum, and Professor Ariel Hirschfeld. We are going to talk about museum and politics. And then on the 23rd, it's a mistake here, on the 23rd of June, we are going to actually abroad to London and Israel. We are going to meet David, by the way, your colleague, Daniel Birenbaum, and talk about the museum without walls and VR. And our last meeting is going to be on July with Women Leaders Takeover, with meeting with the director of the Hirshon Smithsonian from Washington. So I hope you will join us for the rest of the meetings. And good night. And we would like
Dafna.
Thank you so much. Let's see everybody. Just before gallery view, I want to see everyone. We don't need any more the presentation. Yeah. So everybody, cheers. And I see, people here from Paris and from Sweden. And hi, everybody. And good night.